So if you've ever watched a true crime documentary or read a book about this particular case, you probably have this very specific image in your head.
Oh, totally. The sort of hypnotic, supernatural, evil genius.
Right. Like this counterculture dark lord who could just brainwash runaway kids with a single stare.
Yeah.
But today, we're welcoming you to a deep dive where we are peeling back 50 years of that Hollywood mythology.
We really are. Because the actual truth is so much more mundane and honestly a lot more chilling.
It really is. We are going to look at the cold, hard facts, the Charles Manson case, and we've got a massive stack of sources to do it.
Yeah, we have a really comprehensive 2025 update from biography.com on where the cult members are today, plus historical records on their infiltration of the Los Angeles scene.
Which includes Spahn Ranch and, wildly, the Beach Boys.
Right. We also have the detailed clinical accounts of the Tate LaBianca murders.
And I think the two most incredible sources we have today are a raw, completely unedited transcript from Charles Manson's 1992 parole hearing.
That one is fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we're pairing that with a 2023 psychological evaluation from the University of Toledo.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you, the listener, that while the myth of Charles Manson is this dark mastermind, these sources paint a very different picture. It's a picture of highly calculated, very human manipulation.
Exactly. So whether you're a true crime buff or just, intensely curious about human psychology, I promise this deep dive is going to give you several major aha moments that just shatter the popular narrative.
Definitely. And before we can even begin to understand the violence, we have to understand the environment. How does a guy who spent most of his life in federal prison just integrate himself into the late 60s Hollywood counterculture?
Okay, let's unpack this, because the whole Spahn Ranch setup is wild. How does a lifelong criminal just walk onto a movie ranch and take it over?
Well, you have to look at the geography first. Spahn Ranch was a 55-acre movie set in the Simi Hills.
Like an actual old Western town set, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was used for B-movies and early TV westerns like Bonanza and The Lone Ranger. But by 1968, the production money had totally dried up.
So it's basically a ghost town.
Pretty much. And it's owned by a guy named George Spahn. He was 80 years old, he was rapidly going blind, and he was trying to run this horse rental business all by himself.
Oh, wow. So he's incredibly vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. And that is exactly what Manson preyed upon. He didn't use force to take over the ranch. He used utility.
Right, the free labor.
Exactly. Manson and his followers moved in rent-free, and in exchange, they just took over the physical labor, mucking the stalls, feeding the horses. They basically became Spahn's eyes and hands.
So if Spahn kicks them out, he loses his entire livelihood. That is such an institutionalized survival tactic.
It really is. It isolated the followers from society and gave Manson total control over this massive hidden property.
Which brings us to, honestly, one of the most bizarre intersections in music history, the Beach Boys connection in the spring of 1968.
Oh, yeah. This is where Dennis Wilson actually picks up Manson hitchhiking.
I always think of this like a virus mutating to fit its host. Manson comes out of prison, sees the whole peace and love acoustic guitar aesthetic, and just realizes, oh, I can use this. I can wear this camouflage.
That's exactly what he did. He played the part of the aspiring singer-songwriter perfectly. And Dennis Wilson completely fell for it. He even brought Manson into the studio.
And they collaborated. Manson had this song originally called Cease to Exist.
Right, which was supposed to be about submission to your brother, but Manson ended up trading his writing credit for a sum of cash and a BSA motorcycle.
Wait, really? A motorcycle?
Yep, which he immediately gave to a family member named Paul Watkins. But the deal went completely sour when the Beach Boys actually produced the track.
Because they changed the lyrics, right?
Yeah. They released it in December 1968 as a B-side. They called it Never Learn Not to Love.
Wow.
And they changed the key lyric from cease to exist to cease to resist.
Which totally changes the meaning.
Completely. And Manson was absolutely furious. He threatened Dennis Wilson's life over it.
But the engineer, Stephen Desper, had a different take on why Manson was uncredited, didn't he?
He did. Desper basically said Manson was uncredited as retribution because he was a thief who kept stealing from Dennis's house.
Wow. So he gets rejected by the Beach Boys. He gets rejected by the record producer Terry Melcher, who refused to sign him.
Yeah, the Hollywood elite completely shut him out.
And that rejection is the powder keg. The spark was about to be lit in August of 1969.
It was. But to understand the explosion of violence, we have to look at the timeline of the murders, strictly focusing on the facts. The violence didn't just start out of nowhere in August.
Right, there was a prelude. The Gary Hinman murder in July 1969.
Exactly. Manson sent Bobby Beausoleil, Susan Atkins, and Mary Brunner to Hinman's house to essentially extort him for property and money.
And Manson actually showed up during this, right?
He did. He showed up and sliced off a piece of Hinman's ear with a sword. Then he just left, and Beausoleil ultimately stabbed Hinman to death.
And Beausoleil wrote "Political Piggy" on the wall in Hinman's blood.
Yes, to try and frame the Black Panthers, which was a copycat motive that Atkins would use later.
Right. And then, jumping to August 26th, there was the murder of the Spahn Ranch hand, Donald Shorty Shea.
Yeah, that was driven by pure paranoia. On August 16th, the LAPD sent a massive SWAT team to raid the ranch for an auto theft ring.
And the family thought Shorty Shea had snitched on them.
Exactly. So Bruce Davis and Steve Clem Grogan ambushed and killed him.
Okay, so that frames the paranoia. Now we have to carefully and respectfully walk through the harrowing details of the Cielo Drive murders on August 8th and 9th.
Right, Manson doesn't go. He sends Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, who acts as the lookout.
They get to 110 and 50 Cielo Drive. Watson cuts the phone line, and immediately things go wrong. They run into Stephen Parent.
He was just an 18-year-old kid who was visiting the caretaker. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And Watson shoots him 4 times in his car, just for being there.
Then they break into the main house. Inside were Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, the celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, and Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant.
And Watson wakes up Frykowski. Do you remember what he said to him?
It's a chilling quote. He said, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business."
It sounds like a bad movie, but it's real.
It is, and the sheer brutality of what followed is staggering. Sebring was shot and stabbed 7 times.
And Frykowski fought back incredibly hard, didn't he?
He did. He was stabbed 51 times and struck 13 times over the head with the butt of a gun. Abigail Folger was stabbed 28 times.
And Sharon Tate. The sources say she begged for her unborn child's life, but she was stabbed 16 times. And then they wrote "pig" on the front door in blood.
It was absolute carnage. And when they got back to the ranch, Manson was actually dissatisfied. He thought they panicked.
Which leads to the very next night, August 10th, 3301 Waverly Drive.
Right. Manson decides to join them to show them how to do it right. They drive to the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca.
And this is where Manson's cowardice really shows. He goes in alone, ties them up, and promises them it's just a robbery, right?
Yes, he completely subdues them. And then, once they are tied up and helpless, he leaves the scene. He sends Watson, Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten inside to do the actual killing.
It's sickening. Leno was stabbed 12 times with a bayonet. They carved the word "war" into his abdomen and left a carving fork in his stomach.
And Rosemary was stabbed 41 times. They wrote "Rise and Death to Pigs" in blood on the walls.
What's fascinating here, though, if you can use that word for something so awful, is that the brutality was shocking, but the motive the prosecution uncovered was even more bizarre.
It really was. We're moving from the physical crime scenes into the courtroom and into this bizarre ideological framework.
Now, before we get into this, I need to make a mandatory impartiality note for you, the listener. We are impartially reporting the deeply racist and politically charged motives as they were presented by the district attorney in our source material. We want to explicitly make clear that we do not endorse these views in any way, shape, or form. We are merely conveying historical facts to explain how the prosecution built their case against Charles Manson.
Right. So DA Stephen Kay explained this motive as Helter Skelter. Manson was using heavy amounts of LSD, and he twisted the lyrics of the Beatles' White Album songs like Piggies, Blackbird, and Revolution 9.
He twisted them into this delusion of an impending apocalyptic race war.
Exactly. He convinced his followers that black people would wise up and kill all the white people. But, he said, Manson and the family would be safe.
Wait, where were they supposed to hide?
In a bottomless pit in Death Valley.
A literal bottomless pit.
Yeah. He actually purchased scuba gear and a golden rope to go down into it. He told them they'd hide down there for 50 to 100 years.
And they would emerge as 144,000 people.
Right. And his ultimate delusion was that because black people would supposedly be unable to govern, they would just willingly turn all global power over to Charles Manson.
It is the ultimate narcissistic fantasy. And the murders were designed to frame black Americans and trigger this war. He even stole Rosemary LaBianca's wallet to plant it in a predominantly black neighborhood.
It was entirely calculated to start chaos.
Which brings us to the raw 1992 parole transcript. Because his defense in that hearing is wild.
His primary defense in '92 was just, I wasn't there.
Literally. He claims he never killed anyone and never explicitly ordered anyone to do it. There's a quote where he says about Bobby Bosley, "I told him, man, you're a man, grow up juvenile, don't ask me what to do."
He constantly presents himself as a victim of the system. He called himself the last chicken in line. He claimed he was just a follower of the kids because he never grew up after spending his life in reform schools and prisons like Terre Haute and McNeil Island.
But I have to push back on that.
Hmm.
If he's just this misunderstood ex-con who never hurt anybody, how do we explain the 60 disciplinary infractions, the CDC 115s that he got while in prison?
You can't. His behavior in that 1992 hearing is incredibly telling. The board brings up an incident where he threatened a female guard.
Oh yeah, the shower incident.
Right. He told her he'd break all her bones. And in the hearing, he justifies it. He blames the guards. He says he has to act that way to stay alive in the prison hierarchy. He admitted to calling them names, spitting on them, exposing himself.
He also did these bizarre hunger strikes, right?
Yeah, he would fast for 30 days. He told the parole board it was to tighten his stomach, but really it was to control the trust of the guards. He weaponized his own eating habits to maintain control.
Yeah, which is such a manipulative tactic.
Oh.
And for decades, people debated if Manson was this evil genius or just severely mentally ill. But a 2023 study finally gave us a definitive clinical answer.
It did. We're talking about a diagnosis from Dr. Joni Mihura at the University of Toledo.
She looked at a confidential 1997 psychological evaluation by Dr. Todd Roy, which was finally released after Manson died in 2017.
And the core finding completely debunked the biggest myth about him. Manson was not schizophrenic.
Wait, really? Because the guy seemed completely detached from reality.
He seemed that way, yes. But Dr. Mihura looked at his Rorschach ink blot test results. Now, his answers were highly aggressive, deeply sexualized, and statistically very bizarre. Less than 1% of people would give the answers he gave.
Okay, so he was definitely deeply disturbed.
Absolutely. But his answers lacked the disorganized thinking and the loose associations that characterize actual schizophrenia.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So instead, he met the criteria for psychopathy. He had a grandiose sense of self, extreme callousness, and he manipulatively used others.
It's like watching a magician sleight a hand. Like in that 1993 Diane Sawyer interview, Dr. Mira noted that his crazy persona was totally deliberate.
It was incredibly purposeful. It was designed to distract reporters from asking about his actual guilt and to keep the media spotlight squarely on him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, why does that clinical distinction matter today? Why do we care if he was a psychopath versus schizophrenic?
Dr. Mihura argues it is vital for modern threat assessment because you can medically treat psychosis, you can give someone medication for command hallucinations.
Right.
But you cannot medicate a psychopathic desire for a race war. You can't medicate a calculated need to manipulate people.
That is terrifying. So Manson died in prison in 2017, always maintaining that spotlight. But what happened to the followers he manipulated?
Well, looking at the 2025 biography.com update, we can track the divergent paths of the 9 key family members.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the core group. Susan Atkins, she was denied parole 14 times. She died in prison of brain cancer in 2009.
And Patricia Krenwinkel is now 77. She is the longest incarcerated female inmate in California. She was denied parole 14 times, though she was recommended for release in 2022 and 2025.
But Governor Gavin Newsom reversed both of those recommendations, right?
He did. And then there's Charles Tex Watson, the primary physical killer. He's 79 now. He actually turned into a born-again Christian minister in prison and earned a business degree.
But still denied parole 18 times?
Exactly. Then you have Bruce Davis, who became a San Quentin preacher but had his parole blocked by 3 different governors. And Bobby Beausoleil, who creates music and art in prison now and actually claims Manson was a blunderer, not a mastermind at all.
What about the ones who actually got out?
The most incredible story there is Leslie Van Houten. She was just 19 during the murders. She spent 53 years in prison.
Wow, 53 years.
Yeah. After 23 parole hearings and multiple vetoes by governors, an appeals court finally overruled Newsom. She was released in July 2023 at the age of 75.
That's huge. And Steve Clem Grogan was paroled way back in 1985 after he drew a map to Shorty Shay's remains. He plays music in the Bay Area now.
And Linda Kasabian, the getaway driver who testified for immunity, she passed away in 2023.
But we have to talk about the zealot, Lynette Squeaky Fromm. She wasn't at the murders, but she camped outside the courthouse during the trial.
Right, with the shaved head and the X on her forehead.
Yeah. And in 1975, she tried to assassinate President Gerald Ford. The gun didn't go off, thankfully. During her trial, she threw an apple at the prosecutor's face.
She was completely unrepentant.
Totally. She even escaped from prison in 1987 just to try and go see Manson. She was finally paroled in 2009. She's 76 now, living in a house decorated with skulls. And in a 2019 interview, she explicitly stated that she is still in love with Charlie.
It just shows the absolute depth of that manipulation. Pulling back to look at the macro level, the sociocultural impact was massive. Joan Didion wrote in the White Album that the 60s ended abruptly on August 9th, 1969.
The tension broke. The paranoia was fulfilled.
Exactly. It led to the rise of Mansonsploitation in Hollywood. From the villain in Dirty Harry to Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it fueled the satanic panic of the 80s.
It even affected Star Wars. George Lucas changed his main character's name from Luke Starkiller to Luke Skywalker, just to avoid any association with celebrity killers.
The cultural ripple effect is just undeniable.
It really is. We've gone from the fringes of Hollywood to unimaginable brutality today. We've waded through the delusions of a master manipulator and confronted the clinical reality of a psychopath who ruined dozens of lives, including the lives of his own followers.
Yeah, it's a heavy history.
It is. And for you listening, understanding the difference between genuine madness and calculated psychopathy is so crucial. It helps us interpret all the true crime media we consume today with a much sharper, more critical eye.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to mull over. We know from that 2023 psychological evaluation that Manson was a diagnosed psychopath and a narcissist who deliberately crafted a crazy persona just to maintain media attention.
He wanted the world to look at him.
He did. So by creating countless movies, documentaries, and podcasts analyzing his every move, has our society's endless consumption of Mansonsploitation inadvertently given Charles Manson exactly what he wanted?
Oh, wow.
Are we, 50 years later, still serving as his unwitting followers, keeping his name alive long after he ceased to exist?
That is a fascinating and deeply unsettling thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.